Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Gilmore. Thank you so much for joining us for our 5th episode of our podcast, Come to the Fire. We have a really amazing guest with us this morning. We have Kristina Maldonado Bad Hand, and really appreciate you joining us and super excited to visit this morning and wanted to thank you for being here and let you share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. Always happy to hop on podcasts. Very fun. I'm Kristina Maldonado Bad Hand. I'm Chichangu, Lakota, and Cherokee. A longtime artist, multidisciplinary artist. I do graphic design, murals all over the place. I wear a lot of hats, so I'm in a lot of community spaces. I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, we've known each other for a while through all your different work. And, with everything that you've done, I guess kind of today with what you're working on, what are some of your, projects that most recently you've been working on?
Yeah, that's always the big question. I have a lot of projects going on, but I'm the executive art director of Create Aya, which is the nonprofit behind IACON. So we actually just recently got some of our committees together for running IACON next year. So I've been doing a lot of interviews with people and kind of figuring out where they fit, talking about breaking the festival up a little bit, probably doing an Educators Day in the spring instead of having the Educators Day on the Friday before IACON, especially because a lot of the people who really use Educators Day are like teachers and non-native audiences a lot. So that kind of started a conversation of could that be something that we do separately and then add our Trickster's Tale Awards that were supposed to happen this year as a part of that. So we're talking about that, and then Blacklight Powwow is coming back, so of course everybody's excited about that. And fashion show, and so IACON planning, usually I'm like planning at IACON for the next year. Yeah. So this year's been a lot of just getting the documentation for everybody so that they can kind of take the reins with it, and we'll kind of see how it goes this year.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I really love your leadership style and kind of how like helping out with IACON this year. It's just so amazing, community being out and families and all of the artists, because so many times artists have to depend on weekend, evening festivals to, kind of sell or showcase their artwork. And so it's such a great venue. And I know with the school day, how many kids did you have out there on the Educator Day?
This year we had kind of a little bit of a mix-up with media. So we had a way lower turnout than this year than last year. Last year we had 700.
Wow.
But that's part of what kind of started the conversation about Educators Day, because of there was so much going on this year with Blacklight Powwow, and everybody kind of thought that like from the fashion show to the cosplay contest that was the bulk of the festival, and we lost some of the marketing around Educators Day. And so that's what kind of caused that reflection. Maybe we just separate Educators Day. But, our nonprofit is about uplifting marginalized artists and fostering cultural reconnection. And so the really exciting thing about IACON is we've been able to engage people throughout the year, even after IACON. Our philosophy, it's always meant to be like accessible to community. And we kind of have this idea, that you can't make people sell out their table and make a lot of money, but you can connect them to really cool people.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really big part of IACON, is building community and building connections that last throughout the year, where even if they don't do really well on that weekend, hopefully that connection leads to jobs and other opportunities and other events and things that they can continue to build. And so they walk away like with a really good sense of community. And we've actually had a lot of vendors say like, some of their best friends now they met at IACON. And they continue talking to them. And a lot of the committees that I've been interviewing, they're all people who have been involved with IACON from year one, either as an attendee or as a vendor. As volunteers, day of, as soon as I put the call out that we wanted people to kind of organize throughout the year, they were really excited to join in.
They're ready to go. Huh?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, just spending time there together, and you can tell that it's a community that knows each other, and just having the powwow down there along the South Platte, and at night and everything. And so what are you planning for this next year for IACON, if you're going to have like the fashion show and splitting out the education piece? How many people are you maybe planning for in 2026?
That's always the kind of hard part. Is we've grown every year. Started out with 900, and then it was 2,500, and then throughout this past weekend, we actually saw about 4,000 people throughout the whole weekend.
Wow! Congratulations.
So we need another venue again. So and indoor outdoor for a Comic-Con was a little hectic. I spent most of Saturday chasing down people's booths, and it was a little crazy. I prefer to not do that again.
Right.
Although the powwow outside was pretty cool.
It was.
But we were looking at a couple of other venues, talking to our partners. Aya's always run on sponsors and donors. This past year was really the first time we actually had a grant to help. It's really a community. And like, even though it was just me behind pulling like the main programming stuff, it really only happens with community. I mean, it was so beautiful to see, and that it really makes you think about like Denver, how we have those spaces, but how maybe thinking about spaces in a different way so that we have more of those indoor, outdoor spaces that can really accommodate different festivals and things like that. Yeah, there's definitely, I feel like Denver used to have a lot of really cool venues, and that's definitely been an issue lately, is like some of those venues going away or being turned into different things. That's been kind of a conversation in the art world of Denver for a while, of people having accessible venues and spaces to create. One of our partners is, Cast and Redline, and Louise is a really big help with that. And she's always trying to find space for artists. So
where have you kind of seen, I guess, because you've been in Denver for a while. And so I know your family, you're from Taos, but then, kind of Taos, Denver, that old story of going back and forth. If you want to share a little bit about that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, my parents actually met at Crow Dog Sundance, and then it came back and forth to Denver, and ended up moving here with a lot of their family friends and my uncles and like people that I've grown up around, and they were a big part of the Native community here. They helped start the Denver Indian Center and Denver March Powwow, and my dad worked for National Indian Health Board. And my mom did a lot with like the Native community in terms of like education and economic development. And then they had all of my siblings here. I'm the youngest of four. They had all of them here, moved to Taos, had me, and then as soon as I got like college ready, I came back to Denver. And my dad thinks that's really funny because we swapped places. All my siblings stayed for the most part in Taos, and at the first chance I got, I came like right back to Denver. But I grew up coming here for Denver March Powwow every year, and a lot of my aunties and family are still here, so it was kind of a natural choice to come to Denver. I kind of always knew, even like in grade school, that I wanted to go to school in Denver. Probably could have done my research college-wise a little bit better. I applied for the Art Institute of Colorado, and they looked at my portfolio and were like, "You're in." And it was a for-profit school that did close because of fraud. So that's when I work with students now, I'm just like, just do your research. I knew I wanted to be in Denver and I was in the right place, but I did not look at any other schools.
And it was hard because
was like
back
the first
then,
one.
they had the best commercials.
Yeah.
And like, I even remember you're like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I should go there. And the fallout from it. Oh,
and I mean, I came here for like a summer program when they looked at my portfolio. And like 17-year-old me, like what sold me on the school, and this is kind of embarrassing, is that they took me through one of the animation labs and there was a huge poster of my favorite video game. And I was like, I'm coming.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, I know. So that
Yeah.
I worked in Indian education for a really long time. I worked for Jeffco for about oh my gosh, 8 years. I
Wow.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And all the time working with Native students about like where they were picking schools and everything, I was just like, all right, learn from my mistakes. If you want to go to art school, weigh your options. Because I also realized, I went for media arts animation and realized the first semester animation was way too intricate for like the level of detail I put in my work. But the school wasn't accredited, so I couldn't transfer.
Yeah. So you were stuck.
Yep. So
Then with
I ended up making the best of it, and I met some amazing people, and my teachers were awesome. But the school was really what you made of it.
Yep.
They didn't really guide your hand very much, so they just kind of had resources that were there, and you could either take advantage of them or you could kind of just go through. And so luckily I had a really good group of friends where we took advantage of every opportunity that we could find.
That's good. That's good. Well, and sometimes just, I think the healing of things like that is just being able to at least share the story with others and say, learn from, what I did and how you could do better or do different. And so after you got through with school, were you, because I know that like with the powwow, so your family, I just remember from this last March, like your family's very, very involved, of course, with the March powwow, but then it sounded like you had an honor of drumming with your family at the opening of it. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my dad wrote the Denver March powwow song, which is called "A Living Hoop." It's the song that they sing every grand entry. So my family's been the drum that's led that in for like, oh gosh, probably the past like 50 years, because that's when the song was really created. So my family's drum has done that. Obviously, I'm not 50, so I haven't been in. But I grew up really doing that. And it's kind of changed. People get older. My siblings are in different spaces now. So we're still trying to figure out what that looks like in the future. But it's kind of morphed in the past 10 years to like me running around and getting singers from the drums and like asking them to come sing with us for grand entry. But yeah, it's been a really big part of growing up, is that song is like always, my sisters and I used to say it was like medicine, because we'd look forward to coming up to Denver and hearing that song and singing it in every grand entry. So I actually did an animation where teaching people the lyrics of the song, because there was a point where people kind of didn't know what the song was about. We've kind of gotten to a point where powwow songs are losing the like language aspect. And so I did a little animation project teaching specifically those lyrics. And then my goal is to do all of my dad's songs, but as mentioned, I have a lot of busy projects and things.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
But I mean, how amazing, because meaning is so connected to language, and if you separate those, it takes away something from it. You're just missing something. And so when you were growing up with your siblings, like you then all participated together and sang together during the grand opening and everything. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean,
That's
it
so
was
beautiful.
a little controversial, because there's a lot of tribes that don't let women sing at the drum. And I grew up in a very like mixed drum. My mom sang, some of my aunties sang, so our drum always had women. And we faced a lot of like stuff off and on over the years, where there was people who were like, the women aren't supposed to sit at the drum, you sing Wichaglata behind the drum. But honestly, my sisters, I think, took it a little bit more personally than I did. I was like, this is my dad's drum, I don't sing at other people's drums in that way unless I'm explicitly invited.
Sure.
But with dad's drum, he was always like, this is the way I want it. So too bad to everybody else. It's like, yeah. And that's a lot of my dad's philosophy, honestly.
Yeah. I remember when I, met him and was talking to him this last March, and just, I mean, how amazing just the wealth of knowledge and history and experience. And I mean, he really was doing things maybe in a way that helped keep people together in a different way, because it is so hard. And I know, just even like within the community today in Denver, I'm really kind of seeing, that desire from people, not only with like art and, art events, but language and preservation of culture. And I think sometimes it's maybe where we're at societally, it's kind of really unrestful as society. So maybe people kind of go to things that maybe feel comforting in some way to them. And so, like you working in, education in Jeffco, I'm just really interested as to like what your thoughts are around, like the Trek reports and education, and where Colorado is in that, because I know there's still some work to be done, hopefully, to get more education out to students all across the state.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I like to refer to Denver as being in bubbles, because it is a relocation city, and there's just so much that you look at like Denver proper, but a lot of our community actually lives on the outskirts of Denver, in like Aurora and in Lakewood and Broomfield, Boulder, all the way to Castle Rock and Colorado Springs. And they're all part of the same community, but there's like these little pockets of like information where people will be sharing a lot of those stuff. And there's been a discussion about like how to bring that together for years. And I'm chair of the Native Futures Giving Circle, and we created a website, but like definitely updating that website has been like interesting. I'm trying to make it so that it is accessible to community, but within reason. So I want them to be able to post their events and everything, but so much so that we can kind of like filter what's a community event versus what's a birthday. Because can you imagine a calendar with everybody's birthdays? It would be like chaos. So that the coding aspect of that has been interesting, but that has been an idea that people have floated around in the community for 30 plus years. And a lot of the really cool things that are happening in community right now have been discussions that elders have brought up for a really long time, like even when my parents were here. And so it's exciting to see them starting to happen. And I think the community like wants them to happen. So it's just keeping people informed is always interesting when it comes to like the bubble. And in those bubbles, like community wise, there's also the outer community when it's the non-native community. And because we're so bubbled off, I think there's a lot of that where when I first came here, actually, I taught with Pop Culture Classroom. And one of my first classes, I had a little boy who was like, "Are you a real Native American? I thought they were all extinct." And I was like, "Well, okay, first off, you're a Native American," because he was Mexica. And he was like, "What? No, I'm not." We had that whole conversation. But, this was like in 2012.
Yeah.
And he was genuinely like, I never knew there was Native Americans. And I had a lot of interesting experiences teaching with Pop Culture Classroom, where I kind of got to see a lot of this firsthand, because I had another class that I taught out at Fort Lupton, and they had me, in the library, and there's all these huge paintings of like soldiers shooting at natives.
Oh God, yeah.
I show up in my beaded earrings, and I'm like sitting there teaching like in front of all of these like massacre like photos, and I was like, this are massacre paintings, and I was just kind of like, this is really uncomfortable.
Oh my God, yeah. You're like, there's like, it's kind of dystopian when you think about it, just around the it's the ignorance or just the naivete of people not having an opportunity to learn, or that it's so bizarre. Like Colorado and New Mexico, I think there's almost like this veil over people that it's like you're not enough of, you're never going to be enough of, you don't belong. And so then it kind of just creates that. And like if it's going on within community, I can only imagine that the broader community is sort of like, okay, I don't know where to show up in this space. And just we're seeing like pictures and really hearing, names of actual people. And I think that that's where, like, with the Sand Creek Massacre and like any Denverite that you would ask today, how is that related to Denver? Most likely they would say, not at all.
Yeah.
There's no connection.
There's a big connection.
Oh my God.
That's
Yeah. I mean,
huge.
the story, and that's where I'm like, with downtown Denver, like, Silas Soul was assassinated downtown. There were activities that were done in that space that we never talk about, and I often wonder, like, how it would change if there was honestly better education and acceptance of the role that very prominent doctors, lawyers, government officials actively did in the Sand Creek Massacre, and how we just kind of don't talk about it at all. And like within education, I mean, young, like in elementary school and learning about it, that seems like a way to really get that message across. And so is it controversial for folks, or is that what, kind of holds it back? Everything, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely controversial because, our history books do not reflect. That's definitely a space where I've kind of lived in for a long time. It, like, the way I've always kind of been taught is like sharing that stuff through art, and being able to kind of shine some light on that with Pop Culture Classroom with their colorful history. I actually did a Tale of Sand Creek, where I interviewed an elder in the community, Virginia Allrunner, and got her family's story because her grandfather survived as a baby. They put him in a saddle bag and sent the horse off. And so that story, I interviewed her and I sat with her, heard all about like her family and everything. And then I created a quick little like ledger style 2-page comic that taught her history and also like ended with specifically that these people are still here. Because a lot of the narrative you see about massacres and battles is they're extinct. This is what did happen. This was their land. And that's a lot of what kind of inspired IACON. Like when we were doing Fan Expo and Comic Cons, I've done comic books for a while. My husband's a comic artist. And in 2015, when Denver Comic Con came here, actually it was like 2012 is when it started. 2015, there was a group called the Indigenous Narrative Collective that came and set up. And I was a volunteer that year. I was like running through and I ended up stopping by their table and I was like, oh, you're looking for Native comic artists? I'm a Native comic artist.
Oh my God.
And then they were like, great, we want you. And I really, really had to pee. So I was like, great, I have to pee. And then I like ran away. But then I came back with my portfolio and I started talking to them. And from that year, we ended up doing more about Natives in comics. And that's actually when it really started like rising up even in Marvel, where the narrative about Native characters like in Marvel and DC started becoming more of a discussion. And we started doing panels at Fan Expo about one of my first ones was Indigenous women in pop culture and talking about the representation of female characters in pop culture that are Native. And there wasn't a lot of good ones. There's some really like awesome ones that people actually never even realized were Native. So like in Gargoyles, Elisa Maza, who's the main character as a cop, everybody just was like, oh, she's Mexican or, maybe she's black, but she's actually Hopi and black. And there's whole episodes where they address that. But for some reason, it just kind of like glamour people didn't register that she's actually an Indigenous character. And then there was like other characters that obviously were hypersexualized or fringe or talked to animals, had all of the check boxes.
Yeah.
But those discussions kind of led into the talk of doing an Indigenous Comic-Con and what that would look like if we actually showcased what people were making from a contemporary lens. Because I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where they're like, well, we make anime. Do Native kids like anime? And I'm like, what
like,
kind of question?
We're like
is
all
that?
living in this time frame, right?
Yes.
Like we're like it is it's modern times for everybody.
Yes.
Better or for worse.
Yeah. And when I was at Jeffco, we used to do a presentation called "Not All Indians Live in Teepees." And the first 2 years of that presentation, you'd be surprised how many kids raised their hands when we asked that question. And yeah, it was very like this was 2016 when that question happened. So I've done a lot of presentations and conversations about like what Indigenous art looks like, to like representation in pop culture, to basically just how we're perceived as people. Because I think there's a lot of Phil Gover said that we're the historical unicorns, right? Like kind of elevated on this like mythical creature up there with Peter Pan, you know, like in that book particularly, where it's treated like a mythical or like magical beast. And so that actually is still the attitude a lot of people take when they meet Native people, is they're like, oh, this is, you know, like there's so few of you left and you're kind of like magical. And I've actually had people pet me.
Oh
so
my God.
Like,
oh yeah. You're just like bubble. There's a bubble. And the, you know, if people open their eyes and actually looked around, like there are American Indian people everywhere.
Yes.
And it's just like that kind of that veil of like you can't say it, you can't acknowledge it. And so then it goes to like a weird space that it definitely dehumanizes people and takes away the contributions and the work that people are doing right here in the present to change that fact. And it's always interesting how like you know, life follows art. I mean, and it really is where art at this time and how to connect with the broader community hopefully can start to create more awareness and for people, because there's so many big issues that the community is still tackling and dealing with, and it takes away the validity of all of the challenges that the community has by not recognizing people today. And so it's like I don't know how you call that out, but it is really kind of like, if you don't acknowledge it, then you're taking away the solutions that should be coming forward to help with problems. And I'm just thinking like housing and access to education and kind of all of those different social determinants of health that we talk a lot about really in like the Black and Latino community, but American Indian and Alaska Natives are always number one on the amount of people that are affected by that. And so, you know, I think through art, hopefully it can start to change that narrative. And kind of, what are you hearing from like younger artists that you're working with, and even older artists? Because I think so many times, like I'm finding it, our society is so like youth focused that there's a lot of elders that still want to give so much and they're just trying to kind of be like, listen to us, we're here, who's gonna like help us in our space? And so kind of, what are you hearing, especially from the art community, about what their wants and needs are right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, like I think every Indigenous person is an artist, because honestly, our regalia, everything is so inherent in there. And that's part of why at IACON we have like a novice artist program that's all ages. It's not just for youth, because aspiring artists can be every age. My oldest novice artist was 84.
Oh.
And this past year, like actually when I worked for the Denver Art Museum, we did a youth exhibition called Indomitably Indigenous that was about giving artists pathways. As an artist, my biggest thing is breaking the narrative that you have to be either a studio artist or like a freelance artist or kind of in the starvation artist area that everybody assumes, because honestly, art is the center of society. Like, it's everywhere outside of just being a Native person. It's in architecture, it's in medical illustration. Like, there's a lot of spaces where that art can thrive. And breaking those barriers where you actually can show artists that they don't have to let go of their creative side to be successful has always been really important to me. And so when we started the Indomitably Indigenous show, it was not only to give the kids like an opportunity to put their art on the wall in the museum, but also to like show that in arts and cultures, you could be a curator, you could restore art, you could basically do facilities, which is, even though it's not like you're not creating art, you're helping art thrive. Exactly. And so we did those, and Albert Foote had was there doing a blessing when I did the first one, and he was like, how come you never do anything like this for elders? And I was like, that is a very good question. So I was able to do an elder art show at the museum and showcased him and a few other artists, and learned actually that he had never really showcased his art before. He'd been working on some of his paintings since the 80s, and he was 84, and was, working on his paintings were never done. He continued working on them like all the time, so much so that we actually had to stop him from painting on the wall when it was hanging.
He's like, it's just a little.
Yeah, we had to be like, Albert, no, you can't do that while it's on the wall in the art museum. But right after that, he was asking me more about like getting involved in doing shows, and we got him into like 3 different shows. We had him at IACON, learned very quickly that he was not a vendor, because he set up his stuff and then just kind of walked away. We were like, where did he go? And then he was like, if anybody needs anything, they can just call me. And we're like, that's not how vending works. So we realized, that he needed to be more of an exhibition artist. So we had him at our gallery in Creative Nations for a few months, and he had his stuff up. He had passed away this summer. And one of the like last things he said to me was, thank you for like letting me showcase my art, because he'd never really had that before. And if we didn't do that program, he wouldn't have done it. And then I have other elders like Beverly Granger and Cecilia Bulbear that ask me all the time about like other opportunities and places where they can showcase their art and their traditional knowledge. And that's part of what added the like cultural reconnection aspect of things, because it's all kind of related aside from just showcasing the art and the contemporary, and that Native people are still here and actually contemporary and not living in teepees.
Right.
Aside from that, it's also reconnecting to that traditional knowledge, because there's a lot of displacement and there's a lot of disconnection of that, and by design. I mean, our government literally had people signing papers renouncing their heritage, even if they were coming from European countries when they first came. So I think displacement is actually the one thing every American has in common. And that's a big part of IACON, is like connecting through that and acknowledging that, because we look at everybody as Indigenous people, even if they're from Europe or Scotland, or like we have a vendor from Japan and Brazil, and like all of those places, like we just want to encourage them to reconnect to those roots and then showcase like what the future looks like. And for Native people especially, we always in our spaces talk about 7 generations, and we talk about what comes next. And most of the world looks at us as like the past. It's like, what did happen to Native people and how many of them are left? In a lot of talks and things I still do, I ask the question of how many tribes are there? And nobody gets it right, like ever. I think maybe one person has gotten it right, like in probably like 10 presentations I've done in the past 2 years. Yeah, and that one person was Native. So yeah, when they guess the numbers, it tends to be really low. They tend to be like, oh, there's like 5. There's it's like Cherokee, Dene, like Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho. And it's like, that's not even close. And that's also not getting into like the Mexican tribes. There's a ton. There's 99 tribes in Mexico that are Indigenous and still practice. So that conversation is like, art's a really good avenue to do that, but also like showcasing that connection to that culture. You can't just like showcase the future. You have to also look at the past.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with elders and especially like the process that people go through to create art, I think that's something from a cultural standpoint is so important, and that a lot of people that maybe aren't artists or um, aren't working with, um, people that are working on a practice that is maybe hundreds or thousands of years old, that there's a lot that goes with it. And it's not necessarily maybe something that could be taught in like a college course. There's different parts of it. And like, kind of, how do you see, um, like, more support for artists, I guess, in that space, or, and if it's physical space, or if it's money, if it's like, how could folks support better?
Well, unfortunately, like I personally hate money, but it's so like
I know.
you need it to survive. But I think lived perspective is really important, and when it comes to like artists, and especially now in the age of AI,
Yeah.
space is really important, and funds to be able to do these things, but also like understanding what lived perspective is, and that some art forms have traditions that are meant to be taught only within certain groups, especially in a cultural setting. So if there's like a traditional skill set that, while yes, it's an art form and it's beautiful, it is meant to be passed down particularly to those people rather than to others. And that's not in a form of like trying to exclude people. It's just part of the culture.
Right.
And like my dad has this philosophy where like if we share it, it can never be taken from us. But I think the conversation there is also like, what are the ways that you can share? And sometimes sharing isn't giving people all of the tools they need to replicate it, because then we do get into the conversation of like Native appreciated or Native created versus Native inspired.
Exactly.
And that's where a lot of community gets offended and upset about pretendians and about the real like theft of Indigenous practices, because when you share it, that doesn't mean that you have the autonomy to take it over and to make money off of it and take resources away from that community. And when it talking about like growing in different directions, one of the things that's really drives me absolutely bonkers is whenever there is an opportunity for Native people that has the branding on it where it's like this is a Native thing, it becomes the only opportunity. And people try to pigeonhole every idea they have into that one opportunity. And in other groups and communities, that's not the case. When something comes up, it's like an opportunity comes up and they're like, okay, maybe this doesn't fit, but there's always going to be another opportunity.
Right.
In Native community, that has not historically been the chance. So when people see an opportunity, they do tend to cause a lot of lateral violence on each other, and they climb over each other because they've been taught that that is the one opportunity, that if you don't grab that now, there won't be another one for a long time. And so then they stop pausing and they stop reflecting. And someone told me, that to pause and listen is an Indigenous practice, and to like really plan your next steps with intention. And that's definitely the way I've always been taught, both intentionally and unintentionally by my dad and other elders. But, when you have that urgency, it doesn't let you do that. And a lot of government design, even outside of just art and like commerce opportunity, food opportunities, that's been it's like the truck is coming today, and if you don't get your food, too bad, you don't eat this winter. And that's kind of been like hammered into community. And so it like drives me crazy when people have great ideas and they try to like pigeonhole it into whatever thing is out there that just says like, hey, we have this one opportunity for Native people. So then they all try to jam it into that one thing, instead of thinking about, well, how else can we make this happen? Like, where are there other areas that we can branch this out? It doesn't have to just be this one opportunity. It can be multiple happening simultaneously. And we even see that in like the comic industry. Like one of our guests said, Iacon Afua Richardson was just talking to me about that and how she's Afro-Indigenous. And so the company hits her up anytime they have a Native character, and it's the only time they hit her up. So they don't let her like illustrate Spider-Man or just characters that are not Indigenous. She's become the Indigenous illustrator. So anytime there's an Indigenous character, they go straight to her, which is great. There is like, with that lived perspective, you want artists who have ties to that community to illustrate. But it stops there, and it shouldn't stop there. It should be like, these are the opportunities to showcase her. Now she can move on and do all these other things. And then you showcase another Indigenous artist, and you bring that other Indigenous artist in and let them move on to illustrate. Because there's white illustrators that have been illustrating Black stories and Latino and Native stories forever.
Forever. There's always, that's all.
They don't get pigeonholed to just doing Superman. So like, we talked about that a lot, because that is something that is common around all of the comic and like art industry, is because they hear the community feedback of, we want somebody who knows this community and is like, has lived perspective, that becomes the pigeonhole. They they'll only think of that character when it comes to this particular thing. It's like that artist or that storyteller, that writer, they're officially branded Indigenous. And so then they become the token.
Wow. I was going to say, it's very tokenizing, kind of like, when somebody wants to know about a community, in a meeting, they would ask that one person, and you're like, there's no way one person speaks for the entire dynamic of a community and like broaden your perspective. But it's, and the bringing in others, I think that's something that, it's easy for companies or easy for the government or easy for the powers to be like, well, we've got that taken care of. Check box, we're good, we'll go to the next, not fully understanding how much mixed race ties into, like, especially Denver and the Front Range and the history of Colorado, and how limiting companies really are in those spaces when they're not recognizing that and that lens. And like Rick Waters brought it up, but he was like, think Indian, or having that perspective of kind of the pause, I think really is. And, when Scott and I founded Elk and, started getting kids outdoors, and like, that was something that I grew up with. Scott didn't necessarily grow up with it, but in college, he kind of found that as his respite. Like, there was something missing, and he just needed to get outdoors, and he needed to start like slowing down and paying attention and learning more. And where nowadays you're kind of like, with AI and with everything that's going on, it's, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, or it's really, everything is so connected, because when you talk about the expansion of AI, that impacting artists and artwork and the organic nature of it, and then data centers and water usage and power and energy, I mean, it really begs the question. And like, having that pause and community understanding their power. And I know that that's really hard to do when community has been treated in horrific ways, but that the power in numbers and the strength in numbers. And I feel like that's a lot of what, like, the elders are trying to talk about a lot. Like, create these spaces for us, give us the spaces, and like, we know what to do. Like, you don't have to tell us what to do. We know. And like, what's been your, like, kind of, how do you look at that with all the busyness and everything else that you're doing? Kind of, how do you find that space to kind of slow down and listen? Because clearly you're doing something really right, because you are in all these different spaces and doing an amazing, wonderful job. But I'm sure there's a certain amount of discipline behind it.
Yeah, I mean,
you appear so carefree and everything, and I know you
Definitely not
are, but
carefree.
you are like, yeah,
Yeah.
a lightness about you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
Uh,
my thing whenever anybody asks about like how to support Native community is really creating those pathways.
Right.
Because like you just said, and actually they just said recently in Boulder, there was an event where someone was like, if it includes us, if it involves us, then include us.
Right.
Because that has been an issue for decades where people think that they can speak for Natives. Even if they've just spent a little bit of time or they have family members who are Native, they think that they can basically have the autonomy and the power to be able to speak. But that no matter what, like their lived perspective is going to be different than the people who lived that. Even if they've been a part of the community and they're witnessing it, there's just nuances that happen even within our own community. I think that's something that people often forget is like Native American is kind of like the pan-Indigenous box, but there's so many identities in just even one tribe. Then you amplify that in the 500s, like there's no way that you can represent all of them in one conversation. Yes, we have similarities, and yes, there's like a lot of traditional knowledge that I would say actually expands across the whole globe as far as Indigenous people go. But there's cultural nuances, and there's things that people hold on to and have different opinions about, and even like I said, within families, like my experience is very different from my sister's experience just because I'm a different person.
Right.
So the way I react to things is very different from the way she reacted to things. And we grew up in the same household. So then you do that as like a whole tribe that grew up on the reservation and off reservation.
Yeah.
And it's pretty expensive. And I think the hardest thing to build is trust, but it's also the easiest thing to break, especially in Native community. And what I would say is just to have like grace and understand that people are prone to mistakes and mishaps, and that should be expected, that there's always going to be a mistake or a mishap. But that doesn't mean that they should be condemned or that, they should be canceled right away. There just needs to be a little bit more grace in our communities and also with like how Native community deals with other spaces. And that is a really hard thing to ask for a group of people that have been historically and continuously like stepped over and broken trust, broken treaties. Like it's really hard when you have every reason in the book to not trust somebody or to not believe them, to be able to give them some grace. And yeah, so that's always the big hurdle. I think those pathways and honestly having conversations about like opportunities being real opportunities and finding ways to help ideas kind of turn out and become things. And there's even, been issues in our own community about like fast fashion and the use of AI within Native community. But that's the first step. I think oftentimes people look at representation in Native community as like, oh, cool, we gave them the opportunity. That's it. Now they just got the opportunity to highlight or to showcase, and we don't need to do anymore. But that's not how a relationship works. And that's not how humans work. So just because you're an artist and you got an opportunity doesn't mean you're going to do it all perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And if you don't have the opportunity to reflect and to move forward past that mistake and build something again, then it kind of creates this like standstill where the mistakes keep happening. And it becomes like the norm, where that mistake is now like cemented in the internet. You don't get a chance to actually grow from that. And I was taught that culture doesn't stay still. Traditions don't stay still. They're supposed to breathe. They're supposed to go out and then come back in. And there's like a breath. So you grow those traditions, you add to those traditions, and you hold on to what's sacred about those traditions, but you don't try to keep them. You don't try to possess them. And again, because of our history, it's very easy to be like, I want to hold on to this. But oftentimes the harder you hold on to something, the easier it is to lose it.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how that dynamic plays out, and then really in these spaces not having maybe someone who is a liaison or an intermediary. So it's got to feel very it's got to feel very scary and very like you have to be perfect in what you're doing for your art to keep this opportunity for you to get the next opportunity. But making mistakes is sometimes part of art, and like, you never know what's going to come of it. And so that's really helpful, I think, for folks to understand is, and that the opportunities could be so vast because there are so many different facets of it. And really kind of what are some of those opportunities that you're seeing within kind of the Front Range or even within Colorado, New Mexico, kind of this area that are opportunities, I guess, for artists, or where even as like corporations and government, how to open up those more and do a better job in that space.
Yeah, I think like thinking out of the box, because people think, oh, an office building, we don't need to incorporate artists, but then they'll go to Ross and buy like a random picture to decorate the office.
Yeah.
Or when they're building a new building, they don't think about architecture firms that could be Indigenous, that don't have to have an Indigenous design. They could just be Indigenous.
Right, exactly.
To contract and bring in, and like everything is interconnected. And like I said, art is actually a really big part of how we design everything. Yeah. And so bringing in an artist doesn't have to be it's Native American Heritage Month, we need a Native artist to showcase on our walls. You could actually you could hire people to work in the front desk. You could have an event. You could throw a powwow. You could basically do anything to incorporate that community without it being the box of just Indigenous Peoples Month or Indigenous Peoples Day or Native American Heritage Month, or when you're supposed to think about the people, then you go think about them. That could be a practice that happens all year round. And I've talked to the Denver Art Museum about this multiple times.
Okay, yeah.
We had like multiple conversations, because when I was a fellow, my job actually didn't have anything to do with Native community. And I ended up like being kind of the liaison between the Native community and the museum, just because I had that lived perspective. And so there was things that we incorporated community in that they never even like registered. Wow. So we had like a skateboarding show, and there's Native skate companies and artists who showcase that. So we were able to bring that in. And like with the Lowrider show, there's like a lot of people who had experience of being in that community.
There's like a Puebloan artist now that I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Because again,
so
like there's so many different identities, and people grow up next to each other in these cultures, or they are part of that culture. So it kind of merges.
Art it becomes society's culture at some point. I mean, the popularity of it, and when you think about music and food and all of the different facets. And this is kind of, this conversation is something that when the community had brought up the idea about an embassy or a cultural center, kind of what were your thoughts and ideas around it? Because I know it was a very quick process. Like it was so fast, and we were able to get the $20 million for the structure. And like now it's kind of just time to dream and time to throw out all those ideas and not be so worried about that we're going to get everything right. Because of course we want to be respectful and want to follow things in a good way. But now it's really time for, I feel like, the community that's here to get together and think and dream about that. And like, what would that look like to you, that we would do that in a good way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the the big thing is really understanding relationships and partnerships, even to like what we were just discussing, especially when it comes to the embassy, because that building is Denver funded and it is owned by Denver, and then we're existing in that space. So I think defining that is really important, so people understand what that relationship is, and that, you know, this isn't a completely like native space. And so that's where the conversation comes up of like what makes sense to go in that space. We had that conversation with the Living Land Project, you know, where we had a really funny like post-it nor like war of like, no sweat lodge, no sweat lodge.
Right.
And it was a really funny moment, but you know, it did start the conversation of like, does it make sense to have a sweat lodge in a public park that will probably have homeless people sleeping in it, and anybody could use it? And people were like, no, nobody can, that's terrible. And it's like, exactly. So given the parameters of the project that we have, what can we showcase that you're comfortable sharing? And that's kind of the same with this like embassy of like what makes sense, knowing that we want it to be accessible to the general public, not just our tribes. And for me, I think a commerce center, an event center, and like, you know, the art market aspect of it is really interesting and exciting. And, you know, like there's a lot of people who will be like, it was my idea, like all back and forth. But everybody has a similar idea because it comes from a need. It is a need of the community. And so everybody recognizes that need. And while what it ends up being might be closer to some people's original visions, it's a collective vision because everybody has recognized that we need some form of like cultural embassy and space to gather. Because our current space together, you know, the Indian Center has a long history of multiple stuff with like the building and just having accessibility issues. And honestly, like, why do we need just one space to gather in a big city that, as I just mentioned, has a community that expands everywhere? And we have people that come here a lot. And Denver March Powwow has been in that Coliseum for a really long time. And so there's like areas that we could use all of these things kind of happening. But me personally, I'd love to see like an Indigenous food market there, because one of the other ways that people could help and assist like Native community without doing the performance of like Native American Heritage Month is order tokabe for lunch. Like just cater tokabe for lunch. It's a Native business that you're then supporting, and you don't necessarily have to do the whole show. It's just you're participating in their art form. And that's why we have art markets and vendor fairs. It's like you buy a bear beaded earrings, you can wear that because you're wearing somebody's skill set. They made it so you could wear it.
You're basically just showcasing artwork.
Exactly. You're showcasing a skill that somebody made with intention and with like honor. Emotion. So like that, and with prayer. And it doesn't mean you should take over and do your own earrings or like mass produce that stuff at TJ Maxx. It just means that you should purchase those, and if you like them, wear them. Like that's cool. That's actually what people want to see. They want to have the conversation of, oh my God, where'd you get your earrings? And like, who made them? Cool. Tell them about the vendor who made them. And at like the cultural embassy, like it'd be great to have a food market where we can help some of these Indigenous food vendors, because to the point of like
a commercial kitchen to
but why couldn't we have that for Indigenous businesses? Where
and up and coming businesses, kind of like that incubator, or where you kind of learn how to do that and everything.
Having the pop up, because people are realizing, you know, gluten is not really great for most natives' bodies, even though we have like fry bread. But honestly, fry bread was a colonizer food. It was a survival food. And Ben from Tokabe will tell you like a whole really fascinating story about like the incorporation of fry bread, but it's not something we traditionally ate. So that's why our communities have diabetes and like gut issues and all of this stuff. And so with the return to Indigenous foods, you need a place to showcase that and a place to like create that in kitchens where you can actually sell it.
Yeah.
And
how you can prepare it. Because,
Yeah.
like, just the different ways or like preserving things. And I mean, it, like jams and jellies and pickling and all the things that, people would do to make it through the winter and kind of the history around that. And that's I love that concept. And then people have talked kind of like a forward facing side of the structure, but then a space only for community.
Yeah.
And kind of what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, me personally, with like my brain, it's like I would love to see like a circular building that on the first floor is like commerce, that has a food court and has shops and things that people could come to. And those shops don't even have to be the kitschy, like this is native art. Like, yes, we could have the native art that's like real, but then you also could have just native owned businesses that are not specific to showcasing that culture. They're just owned by native people.
Exactly.
And that being on the first floor, and then like a second floor that is classrooms for learning and spaces for people to gather. And then like having that be open where there's like an event space in the center that you could use as a powwow, that you could use as a gathering space that is like skylight so you can see outside.
Yeah.
I don't say like open to outside, because if it does go in that area weather-wise is crazy.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I don't really like the idea of giant golf ball sized hail coming in on powwows.
No. Although we did drive out a little bit further and we did see the meteor shower. And so sometimes just right, to see that's so beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that.
Open to being able to see. Like, I think lots of windows so you could see the buffalo if it was out there. Like, that would be great. But having that division be more of like there being a first floor that people frequent, and then that second floor is where people gather and where specifically Native community gathers, where you could have workshop spaces for cultural practices, where you could have conference rooms where people are meeting. You could have offices, like all of that being on that second floor. And then, if you have a conference, you could even have like a dentist conference and have like people, once they're there, go downstairs and you can buy people's artwork. You can get something to eat. You can like, one of the things my husband says is he's like, I want like a native Kinko's in there.
Right?
Just like, and it's funny because Kinko's doesn't
like screen
exist
printing and all the cool gear and everything.
Like
there's
that basically like dates my husband because he says like Kinko's, but like
it's expensive to print though, I have to say. So well,
and we have our own printing stuff through our nonprofit, but one of the biggest issues we ran into last year was like space. And the space that we did have had no parking. And that is another aspect when it comes to community. Like, accessibility is really important. Right. Not just having the space to showcase or the space to create, having the ability for elders to make it there without having to walk a long way, and for people who don't have cars to be able to get there. And for ADA people in wheelchairs to be able to get through the door is like really... Those are all factors that when people want to actually support Native community, to keep in mind that it's more than just giving them a room. It's giving them the ability to actually share that with their community and be accessible to that community. And again, going back to IACON, that's why we have it affordable, because we have all generations and all walks of life that come to IACON. And as vendors in Comic-Cons and stuff ourselves, we see when cons charge like $60 just to get in the door. Nobody's buying from those vendors. And if you have a family of 5 at $60, like your budget, you can't even eat for the weekend. Like,
making it accessible for sure. And then I think that with the area being along the A line and figuring out what that shuttle service is or where folks can get to, and kind of making sure we're planning that out and testing it out so that it's ready to go with the conversations. And then, I mean, I love how you're describing it, because the one consistent piece is always like a public facing portion and then a community only portion, and then the opportunity. I think that's the biggest piece, because especially with the airport, and where, Takabe is out at the airport now at Denver International Airport, but it's very limited. And we as a city have done zero to encourage American Indian concessionaires, construction companies throughout the whole city. So this conversation is starting to bring up, well, if you're a construction company, let's get you in, and let's get you certified as a minority and women-owned business, because there's not only going to be the embassy being built, but there's close to $1 billion in other bond projects that are going to be built throughout the city. And construction is only one industry, because you've got legal, you've got project management, you have lawyers, you have just the whole array, and
the
it's
trades.
So exciting. Yeah.
We have a lot of our community that does construction and electrician and like the trades that honestly they've been trying to get more contracts and be brought into projects and things. So
it would be amazing if there was like a requirement that we really in the city could build up the pool of folks who were qualified to be vendors with the city, and that's, I think, a huge commitment that Denver City Council hopefully will make to the community, because they really got a lot of power to push from that side. And then as kind of you're seeing, like with art, and we've talked a lot about art, but there's also the integration a lot of like with traditional knowledge, especially around where climate change is, and where it's December and we've only had one snowstorm
like this whole season.
It's
scary.
And we're talking about the Colorado River, and we're the upper basin, but will the lower basin have water? And I guess do you see how that connection is all integrated together, and how can we promote or support more of that? Because I've even found, as I'm talking about the small nuclear reactor, I'm the crazy lady that doesn't want any mining. and I'm like, what are you talking about? Mining is not good. You are digging into the earth. I don't even have to go through it. And then the people that are working in those mining jobs, it's always people of color. It's always a safety risk, etc. But we're so energy hungry now as a society. And kind of, what are your thoughts around the integration, especially with climate change? And I mean, like you said, it's all connected, but there's just kind of some of those topics that kind of pop out a little bit more, I guess, just because it's so warm right now in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, it was raining last night. It was really alarming driving around in the rain in the middle of December. Christmas is next week.
Yeah. I think if we're lucky, what the climate scientists say is that it will start raining more, because it was not going to go back to snowing. Yeah. We're never going to get as much snow as we used to have. Yeah. So it's going to start raining more, and maybe we'll luck out for about 10 years and it'll get more moist here, but we've got a window. And where, and I really think of the embassy as being one of those spaces where the conversation can begin to be elevated in a way that we'll start listening in a better way and societally. And maybe that's too Pollyanna, but I'm just all of these different spaces, because it's almost like a lot of other places are sort of doing some of the same work, trying to kind of gather together. So kind of how do you see that integration, and really promoting the knowledge, because really Western science has jacked everything up.
Yeah.
I'll just say that straight up.
Yes,
so, yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, honestly, that's part of where the Living Land Project kind of came up, was was creating living topiary sculptures that I was like, I want to like help purify the land in some way. And then I met Georgia Garnsey, who introduced me to Scott, and that's kind of where it all kind of went from. Yeah. And then the Mycelium Project that Spirit of the Sun is doing is actually more on point with what I was originally thinking. As like an artist, I looked at some air purifying moss and stuff like that, but it didn't really work in Colorado's climate.
Yeah.
But the Mycelium Project that they're doing really does. And so I think I really love mushrooms, but I don't like to eat them. So I get a lot of really funny conversations with people because I love to draw them and I find them fascinating. But I really don't like to eat them. Like, I think that they
from afar.
They taste funny to me and the texture is really odd. So like, I just don't care for it. But I'll have people walk up to me and be like, oh, I have this great lion's manes recipe. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'm sorry. I know they're good for you, but I have to hide it. Like, I have to hide the taste. Oh my God. Because they're just not really my forte in terms of food. But they're honestly, as a food, they're so beneficial and extremely fascinating. And honestly, I feel like we as a society could learn a lot just from how fungi operate off of each other. And that was my big thing for the end of when we did the gala at the Red Line. I'm a resident artist right now. We were supposed to give everybody kind of a gift. So I gave everybody ledger mushrooms. So I drew on ledger paper, I drew little mushrooms, and then I gave them like a little info about why specifically a mushroom. And this art piece, the way we had to do it as artists was we had to design something that was hanging above the table. Okay. And then we had to give people something to take away. And so mine, I did a drum. It was a drum that had a like circle of my bison clouds, because I see bison in clouds. And then it had a bunch of like crystal water drops coming from the drum into a bowl that had a big flower and water. And then there was like the mushrooms. And the whole point of that piece was actually talking about environment and how culture feeds environment. And specifically the cultures that we have like those for traditional roots to, like our indigenous culture has all of those answers about how to fix our climate situation. And so that's why reconnecting is so important. Is like finding out how our ancestors farmed and how they survived the winter and like weird climate changes and patterns changing in animals and paying attention to the stars, like all of that traditional knowledge that all of us have, like somewhere locked deep in here through all that displacement. That's the key to us actually undoing a lot of what's been done by colonization and society.
Oh my goodness.
So like that connection is really important. That's why our nonprofit really focuses on that. And even if it's showcasing like the connection that we have as Lakota people, because Sid Whiting works for me as well, and he's usually one of my teachers for that. Even if we're showcasing from our end, we always encourage people to figure out their own, because there's, you know, Scottish and like Irish, like pagan people have like all of the pagan like traditions have those roots. You look at Yule and the all of the traditions that then got colonized and turned into the Christmas that we know, they have all of that built in there about surviving the winter and about putting intention in there and utilizing plants and the types of things that we burn, from like how we do our medicine. All of that is in there. Create Aya. So with the reconnection stuff, we do have some really exciting classes coming up. So we just did a hide camp last weekend. Oh, nice. With Chelsea Kaya. But in the summer, we're doing land stewardship camps, actually, to what you just said.
Oh, perfect.
One of them is a Cheyenne women's camp. And then we are doing some that are talking about like the relationship to the land and fire keeping and really like planting trees and how do you make sure those trees are growing if we don't have water. And you know, there's traditional knowledge in basically like how we find water. There's a lot around cottonwoods that my culture, and especially like Cheyenne, Arapaho, we look for the cottonwoods, and that's how you know that there's water on the plains, is you just look to find those. And that's a lesson that I taught a lot of my kids at Indian Ed, is like we'd go and we'd find the cottonwood, but then we'd talk about that relationship between the sky and the land. Because in cottonwoods, if you pick up a little branch, if you snap it, if you look inside, there's a star. And there's a Cheyenne Arapaho story that if you snap the star, it goes up to the heavens, and you make a prayer and it goes up. And so I used to do that activity with my Indian Ed kids all the time. But that, like, just that inherent lesson of like how it's all connected. There's star patterns in our food all the time. If you actually look at all of our food has like interesting little star patterns, especially if they grow.
So for
like,
sure. Like, like even in like an apple core or like all the different, I mean, getting back to that connection is so important, and the classes. And I think, you know, the website that you're putting together, because that is the really, and that's one of the things that like has been, we want to have a big gathering space, but we also want to be respectful of having a space that everybody's voices can be heard. And so those, as we're kind of like talking more about the public outreach events and everything for the embassy, you know, I would just encourage community to get involved in classes that you're doing and classes that other people are doing, and that it is for you. Because sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, oh, no, I'm not enrolled. I'm not enrolled.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're not going to check your card. No. You know, like if you have an interest and you want to get reconnected, like just reach out to somebody and start making those relationships. And it's going to be up to you, but like you will benefit in that space. And I love that, because we used to always do that when we would talk about the cottonwoods and like aspens and like mushrooms, how everything is all connected underground and everything. And so definitely we can promote any classes that you have coming up, and the website, definitely interested about helping out and getting that info out to get people more involved.
Yeah, and just to know the things that are happening, because they're, like I said, bubbles. I feel like our bubble kind of merged together during COVID, and then right after COVID, it went back to the bubbles. I'm like, no, we need to like keep the communication like to the point of mushrooms, like synapses network. Keep talking to each other.
So
like,
during the pandemic, was it easier because like just you could connect with people and be online?
Yeah.
And like they were there. And often I think about that, because I'm like, you know, we're kind of like, well, we don't need to do online anymore. But sometimes for some people in certain situations, it's a good tool to use to just get a lot of people together to share a conversation. And so that's a good reminder that it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish people learned more from COVID, to be honest. I actually kind of miss like the lockdown. Just because I could hear animals. Like where we lived in Westminster, and we looked over a giant like golf course. Okay. But there's a family of eagles that literally nested right across from our balcony. And so I spent most of lockdown like watching this family of eagles, but you could hear the foxes. You could actually hear like creatures, because there wasn't as many cars. People weren't like going everywhere. It wasn't as busy. And like, you know, if you wanted to talk to people, you actually had to make an effort to like reach out to them and actually connect. And I feel like after that, everybody kind of went back to the norms, and we kind of lost some of that connection. And being in schools, that was actually like one of my favorite moments, because I got to see kind of behind the doors of my kids, and we had like really funny interactions with pets. and
I
like
bet.
siblings.
Yeah.
And it was like very
You got everybody
humanizing
there,
because you
yeah.
actually got to see like, your teacher wasn't this authority figure.
Right.
It was like they got to watch my cats reenact Lion King behind me on the couch.
Right?
So,
Yeah,
they're
this
like,
is real world here.
yeah, and like they
Yeah.
got to interact with Kodo when he was a baby, and I literally had a meeting where a bird flew into my house, so everybody got to see
no.
like
Oh,
the
geez.
antics of me chasing a bird out of my house.
Oh my gosh.
But
Yeah.
it was funny. Everybody actually like laughed on Zoom calls a lot because you had like people randomly walking in when they weren't supposed to walk in, or you had like just human error.
Yeah.
And it was nice to be able to like see that instead of having like the fit like the mask.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it totally, like, I can see that. And it was so amazing that, like, in the early days of the pandemic, like, the climate started to heal itself. The earth started to heal itself. Like, there were clean waterways. There were all of these things. And like, I feel like we've sped up these last couple of years because I think everybody had such an experience during the pandemic, better or worse. But I think some of those, I hope, will come back forward a little bit more, because there were some good parts that I think were lessons that we didn't know we were ready to learn, but we did.
I'm like, my husband will like say this, but my big thing is I always say everything happens for a reason. And that, oftentimes those lessons, they keep repeating themselves until you learn them.
Yeah.
And that's culturally, like, we have a trickster that we learned from, Miktomi, who's the spider, and all of his lessons are that, like, he will continue to make the same mistakes until he learns them. So much so that, like, he gets his head stuck in a rock kind of situation. So like, but all of everything that happens to us happens to teach us something. And if you don't learn that lesson, it's going to happen again until eventually you either learn it or you just choose not to grow, and then you no longer grow.
Yeah. I can definitely see where societally, like, those lessons are powerful. And if you didn't grow up with them, there's a lot of people that just feel very disconnected from life. And that reconnection, I think, is going to be so important. And just, spending time in spaces like this, just sharing stories and talking together. And, we're just following your leadership, honestly. Like I've always said, just tell me what you want me to do. I'll show you how it works, and we'll see if we can make it happen. And like, there's no accidents. There's no, like, it's all meant to be. But it's just been really an honor spending time with you this morning, learning more about you and getting to share with the audience how amazing and talented and wonderful you are. And so thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, definitely. Right on. Well, good deal. We'll see everybody on the next podcast. So thank you so much, Kristina.
Yeah, thank you for doing this also, and just giving a space for people is really important.
Always.